Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching a brand new edition of Policy Watch with me, Frank Pereira. The government has set up the National Anti-Profiteering Authority amid reports that some companies, particularly restaurants, are not passing on the benefit of the goods and services tax rate cuts to consumers. B.N. Sharma, Additional Secretary in the Department of Revenue, was on Tuesday appointed chairman of the authority. Now, guidelines on what exactly constitutes profiteering are awaited. The authority will exist for a period of 2 years from the date Sharma takes charge. The authority is mandated to ensure that the benefits of input credit and the reduction in GST rates on specified goods or services are passed on to the consumers by the way of commensurate reduction in prices. The government also named 4 senior officials as technical members of the authority. On this edition of Policy Watch, we will analyze the role of the GST anti-profiteering body. Joining me on the program today are Aseem Chawla, partner, Phoenix Legal, and TK Arun, editor, Opinion, The Economic Times. Thank you to both my guests for joining me on this edition of Policy Watch. TK Arun, I'd like to begin with you, of course. What is the role of the GST anti-profiteering body going to be?
So, see, I personally was opposed to this anti-profiteering body altogether. Why will there be profiteering? Why would prices not come down? If you remember, after GST was introduced, cigarette prices came down, first of all. Then the government quickly increased the cess on cigarettes to mop up that reduction in price. The price came back to normal, which showed that when GST eliminates the cascading of taxes, prices can actually come down. It was revealed in the case of cigarettes. Now, why did not happen in the case of other goods and commodities? Now, it stands to reason that normal competition between traders and companies should have brought the prices down. Somehow, it has not happened. If such competition does not work, we already have an institutional mechanism in place to find out why it's not working and to take remedial action, which is the National Competition Commission of India. So, my own initial reaction to the proposal to have an anti-profiteering authority was to say, hey, what is the Competition Commission doing? Why don't you go to the Competition Commission to get a remedy for this? Well, the government has in its wisdom set up this body. Now, I think industry and trade are to blame for not having passed on the possible reduction in prices to consumers. So, they will have to put up with whatever this body does right now. So, with any luck, industry and trade would now show the sense to reduce prices to the extent that taxes, cascading of taxes has been eliminated and a price reduction has become possible, and leave this body without any work. Now, if they do not, then of course the authority will have to examine where all people are taking advantage and refusing to pass on the prices. There is bound to be complaints about harassment. There is complaints about witch hunt, arbitrariness, all that. Now, the government must also bear in mind that while pursuing the goal of lower prices for consumers, it also runs the risk of once again inviting the wrath of the traders and loss of goodwill. So, the commission will also be, the authority will also be mindful of the need to maintain good relations with the larger community.
Right.
So, I hope these tendencies will be checked and will not grow out of control.
Aseem Chawla, once Mr. Sharma takes over, of course, the body is going to be in place for a span of about 2 years. Are 2 years enough to get all these issues in place and ensure that everything goes on smoothly after that?
Well, the way GST was carnated in our system, I think it was to learn, walk along the way, or to learn as we walk and progress. And therefore, the entire recalibration of GST happening ever since it got evolved and between now, I think if we walk along, because government's approach has been not to, especially in GST's case, not to do a lot of preparatory work, but to spend more time on the ground and do course correction, which has its own positives as well as negatives. We saw the negative part of it, how the backlash came up, and then suddenly you find rate calibrations happening, and all along it is happening. And in fact, the minister also went on record to state the fact that by March corrections will happen. So if you were to follow the Australian or the other model where they did a lot of studies beforehand and got their teeth into the skin and ensured a lot of predictability into the system, to that extent, well, we don't have as we speak. The authority is envisioned under the CGST Act, and there are elaborate rules also under CGST rules, and especially Chapter 15, which deals with it. So not going into the technicalities of it, I mean, if...
Well, we seem to have lost the line there with Aseem Chawla. We'll try and reconnect with him. But in the meantime, TK Arun, let's talk about profiteering itself. What exactly is it going to do and what is it going to get into and what constitutes profiteering?
Profiteering in this context clearly means not passing on the reduction in the tax burden on a commodity. See, before GST came, the consumer had no transparency as to what is the exact amount of tax in the price that he is paying. He sees the final sales tax or VAT, that's all he sees. How much has been the element of tax in the transportation of goods before that, at the stockist level, at the distributors level, the wholesalers level, and at the manufacturing level in the form of excise duty. All these taxes accumulate, and when you compute tax at a stage later than the preceding one, the price on which the tax is levied includes the preceding stage's taxes. So you have tax levied upon tax upon tax. GST removes all these cascades of taxes, and therefore the incidence of tax cumulatively comes down. If you say GST on something is 12% or 18%, that's it. That is the only amount of tax.
Yes.
But still, as compared to the earlier situation when the retail price was say 150 rupees with a whole cascade of taxes, and now after this cascade has been removed, again the guy is selling at 150 rupees. Clearly, the reduction in tax is not being passed on to the consumer. The trader or the chain of distribution is holding on to itself. This is what is meant by profiteering in this context of GST.
Sure. Yes, Aseem Chawla has now rejoined us. Go ahead, make a point that you are making.
Yeah, so the point I was trying to make was that the entire aspect of profiteering, if one were to look at only with the lens of cascading effect of tax, and the industry might say that business dynamics are such that tax is one element of it, and if restating of prices have happened, it may be reasons beyond taxation, and just because there has been some alteration in the tax rates may not be ipso facto the basis of passing of the benefit. I mean, for instance, in the case of restaurant, there is a strong case being made by the industry saying that the input tax credit, although the tax rates have come down from 18 to 5%, but the input tax credit has completely got down. So therefore, the whole cascading effect and ability to claim credits on inputs is not there, and therefore the entire economics of making sales or selling food items or eateries at less prices may not work. So the point for the larger determination is that pricing itself is not just about taxes. Taxes is one element and one component of pricing. Yes, if there is palpable prima facie view that but for taxes or the tax arbitrage is not being passed and other things do remain constant within the business dynamics, and therefore why the taxes have not been passed, to that extent the authority has to make a prima facie view, the standing committee of the authority, and the matter is then referred to the CBEC's committee, and the CBEC's safeguard committee will make an inspection and come up with the report, so on and so forth.
Sure.
The other aspect which one need not lose sight of the fact that ever since GST came in, we saw several writs or motions being filed to the courts on various aspects. So let's not forget that once the this particular authority or the standing committee were to start sending notices, etc., you will see a lot of judicial intervention being sought for by the industry and the business community as to what constitutes prima facie view. Is it adequate? Is it sufficient? And therefore, you cannot rule out some amount of litigation. It entirely depends upon whether the authority plays the role of a guardian both to the consumer and to the business, or the authority is on a one-way street, which is more arbitrary, or some sort of a witch hunting on a witch hunting exercise. So if a balanced view is taken, whether do we need an authority or not, I think we are too late in the day to debate that. At the time of formulation of GST laws, I think this could have been well evaluated. But as I said earlier, the way GST got legislated in our country, we didn't get much time to think what all components of GST.
I'm going to take the point that you're making about litigation forward with TK Arun. Stay with us. I'm going to come back to you for another reaction as well. As far as this anti-profiteering body itself is concerned, what kind of a role or a shape do you see it taking, and will it dole out punishment for those it finds guilty? What's going to happen there?
Yeah, it will be litigious. But, I don't think Mr. Sharma is going to be particularly vindictive and all that. I'm sure the effort will be to send out a clear signal to industry and trade that, look, you better pass on the benefit to the consumer, otherwise you will face the music. But how all the functionaries under this body down the line interact with their targeted traders and offenders is a matter up in the air. We don't know beforehand. Hopefully, they will not be arbitrary, but there will be charges of arbitrariness, and even the findings of these bodies will be challenged in the courts. So that will take its own way. But a clear message will go down that the government is serious about tackling profiteering. That is the main thing.
Sure. Okay. Quick closing comment from Aseem Chawla. What are the sectors? I wouldn't call them sectors, but sections which are responsible for not passing on these benefits to the consumers.
I think the simplistic answer would be what affects public at large. Now, considering that there are only 50 items in 28% category, and majority of the items are in 12 and 18% of categories. So what affects public at large is FMCG and white goods. And if there is a simple case that, well, before and after everything remains the same, and it was a simple automatic price reduction which should have happened, I think you would, and CBEC has already reached out to big FMCG players by virtue of a press release that please pass on the benefits. It's a very fine balancing act which has to be done. If you look at the rules, Rule 127 clearly casts a duty on the authority that they should look into the matters, and then they can dole out punishments, fines, cancellation of registration, etc. So therefore, if a knee-jerk reaction can be avoided to it, a balanced view is taken on an overall basis, people should have a lot of confidence in the authority rather than viewing this authority as one of those, again, investigative agencies. And we currently have an overdrive of investigative agencies on a very high octane drive. So adding one more to the list doesn't yield any great comfort to business India as a large,
Okay.
Can I just make a point?
Yeah, quickly, very quickly.
Organized retail can play a very useful role in eliminating the cascade, passing on the benefit to the consumer, and setting a benchmark which then others will be forced to follow.
Okay, all right. TK Arun, do stay with us. I'm going to get your views on the next segment that we're going to discuss here on Policy Watch as well. Aseem Chawla, thank you for joining us on the program. Well, it's time for a short break now. Still to come, TRAI has come out with its recommendations for the net neutrality regime in India. We'll analyze the recommendations on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Tales that inspire. Stories of social change. A salute to diversity. Promoting public discourse. Events that motivate. Inspiring the innovative spirit. Watch Rajya Sabha television documentaries.
Welcome back. You're watching Policy Watch with me, Frank Pereira. India's telecom regulator has published recommendations strongly backing net neutrality, bringing the country a step closer to what could be the world's most progressive policy on equal internet access for all. This is in sharp contrast to current efforts in the US to reserve net neutrality rules introduced by former President Barack Obama. Net neutrality means service providers must treat all traffic equally and not charge differently based on content. Users should be able to access all websites at the same speed and cost. Principle is considered a cornerstone of a free and open internet that provides equal access to all. In our next segment, we will discuss TRAI's recommendations on net neutrality. Still with me on the program now is TK Arun, editor Opinion, The Economic Times. And joining us in the studio is Ravi, Visvesvaraya, Sharda, Prasad, independent telecom consultant. Thank you to both of you for joining me on the program. Ravi, I'd like to begin with you, of course. Let's first understand what net neutrality really is and what it means to us.
Okay, well, I've long been saying that net neutrality is a solution which does not work to a problem which does not exist. Now, what do people mean by net neutrality is different things to different people, but essentially the debate in various countries, USA, Europe and India, is around a few features which are connected but not identical. The first is net neutrality as a technological principle and the idea of common carriage. And net neutrality was propounded in 2003 by a professor of law at Columbia University called Timothy Wu. And there he started looking at an analogy of a series of pipes through which water flows. And saying that, if water is flowing through pipes, the people who control the pipes, the people who own the pipes, should not decide where the water should go or what the destination should be and should not discriminate. But that is not how the internet works, because the kind of implicit idea in that is that the intelligence is built at the ends of the network. That is the source and the destination. And they're saying that whatever is the traffic between the source and the destination, the people who own the pipe should not interfere with that. So it's built on a model of dumb pipes and smart terminals. But the internet is not like that because you have intelligence built into the network with routing. So really that model breaks down. And because of that model breaking down, you start having a whole lot of other issues. The second issue, which again is part of the net neutrality discussions, which have been going on in USA and India and everywhere, is how you treat the over-the-top OTT players. These are the players who offer applications which ride on the infrastructure of the telecom operators or the internet service providers, such as video calling, let's say WhatsApp voice calls, WhatsApp video calls, Skype calls, which are providing services that compete with the telecom operators while using the very same infrastructure of the telecom operators. Right. And it is a very contentious issue as to how these two are to be treated, how WhatsApp or Messenger or OneEdge or Skype is to be treated with a voice call or an LTE call. The third issue on which TRA had debated is the issue of differential data pricing. Now again, the differential data pricing is whether you can charge different consumers based on the content they consume, the source of content they consume, the type of content they consume. And TRA in February 2016 prohibited this, and again, it is not a decision that I agree with. Okay. For various reasons, I can elaborate on later.
Okay. Yeah, sure. We'll try and get into that later on in the program. But TK Arun, as far as TRAI's recommendations are concerned, what is it that it has recommended, and how is it going to change things as they are today?
So even today, we have a fair bit of level playing field as far as access to the net is concerned. See, for a telecom provider, there are potentially two markets. It's a platform. On one side of the platform, you reach out to the consumers who access the internet, the content on the internet using your network. So you charge them for the data they consume. That is one part of the market. The other potential market is the content providers. Theoretically, you could charge the content providers different rates for allowing the content to be accessed by the consumers on the other side of the platform at different speeds. Now, the net neutrality principle is that this side of the market should not operate. That different content providers should not be able to buy their way into getting faster access or buy their way into throttling their competitors' access by using their money power to influence the behavior of the net carrier or the network operator.
Sure, yeah.
So this is the basic thing of the network neutrality. Now, Ravi's objections are more of a technical kind. He is saying that since the network is intelligent in its different nodes, it is not entirely controllable as to whether the data flows would be uniform or faster or slower. That depends upon certain stochastic or probabilistic factors which cannot be controlled. I am sure it cannot be controlled at every moment in time, but over a period, I am sure it can be controlled. That is why telecom operators do want the absence of network neutrality.
Yeah.
Because they are pitching for the right to accelerate certain sites, to decelerate certain sites. So, I think it's a good thing that we are recommending network neutrality. See, the main thing is this: the internet is a great thing. It allows not only information to be accessed, but also certain transactions to be carried out.
Yeah.
So, this is something that is capable of unleashing a whole lot of creativity with business potential and without business potential around the country, around the world. Now, if somebody can, an incumbent using money power, can prevent people from accessing what a new guy is trying to offer,
Yeah.
because he is always buying faster access to his own side by paying the network operator and throttling all competition, then this creativity will stay aborted.
Sure.
Therefore, I am very happy that we are actually putting in place, or at least TRI has recommended, strict network neutrality.
Sure. Ravi, what is TRI really trying to fix as far as net neutrality is concerned?
Well, as I said, it's a solution which doesn't, net neutrality is a solution which doesn't work to a problem which doesn't exist. Now, I'm against net neutrality both on technological grounds as well as on the economic grounds. Let me start with the technology grounds. First of all, these are not circuit switch networks. These are broadband. These are stochastic, statistically multiplexed, distributed computing networks. And you cannot predict with certainty how the network will behave over time. Okay, they operate in a stochastic manner.
Yeah.
Okay, you can conceivably have net neutrality and common carriage if the electrons moved in an orderly way from source to destination in a queue along a line, and not that way. But the way electrons actually move in nature is like we had this stampede in Bombay, the Elphinstone Bridge stampede. And that's the way electrons move. They don't move in an orderly way from source to destination that you can control at regular speeds. They all move in a stampede. They jostle each other out. Some will push their way out. Many will not reach on the way.
So there's no standard pattern is what you're suggesting.
There's no standard pattern. And therefore, you know, any attempts, it's like a quantum mechanical principle where if you try to interfere and measure the flow, you're interfering with the flow. Okay, if you try to control and measure the flow, you're interfering with the flow. Now, also, there's something like the analogy of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which says that, okay, you can't measure the velocity and the momentum of a particle, the position and the momentum of a particle simultaneously. Here, you have what in physics are called the 3 degrees of freedom. You have a load at a traffic load, you have a packet loss, and you have a packet delay.
Yes.
The minute you try to fix one of the parameters, you lose all control over the other two in a statistical network. So for a fixed load, you cannot control both the packet loss and the packet delay simultaneously. So basically, if you're trying to say no fast lanes, that I will not allow fast lanes, all right, operators will keep trying to have fast lanes, but you cannot try to prevent them from not having fast lanes, okay? Because there was a very detailed study by the UK regulator Oftel for 2 years, and it says that from externally observed traffic pattern systems, suppose you see data being throttled, data speeds going down, you cannot with certainty infer that the operator is deliberately throttling. It can be a statistical fluke.
So you can't pinpoint that someone is not playing by the rules, is what you're suggesting.
You can have suspicious behavior. You can have a lot of very suspicious behavior going on, but that suspicious behavior is not enough to convict.
Okay.
Okay. Like any regulator or a court will give the benefit of the doubt. For instance, I've given a lot of expert testimony in high courts on things. And if somebody says, look at this traffic pattern, is the operator deliberately throttling content from this provider and not from this provider? And if I turn around and say, look, there's a 62 probability that he is throttling and a 34% that he's not throttling and the rest is statistical fluke, a court will just give the benefit of the doubt to the, to the operator, saying that, okay, its behavior is suspicious, and if it continues, we'll again look at it.
Okay.
But it's not enough to convict something. It's suspicious behavior, but not convictive evidence.
Okay, not conclusive, is what you're suggesting. Okay,
and,
fair enough. Yeah.
And the second thing on his thing on the differential data pricing, let me go back to his own industry of newspapers. What TRAI was trying to do, and you said, is to block out the content and to prevent the ISPs from entering into deals with content providers. You look at your own industry of the newspaper industry. The newspaper industry has two markets. It has subscribers who buy the newspaper for maybe 3 rupees, 4 rupees, 5 rupees, and you have advertisers who have huge amounts.
Yeah.
You're a dual market. Your elasticities of demand are not symmetric. For instance, the more subscribers you have, you can charge a much higher price from your advertisers. The more advertisers you have, the more revenue you have, you can lower your subscription price. You can give away your newspaper for free.
Right. Sure.
And you can command very high rates from the subscribers, because if you give your newspaper away for free, and instead of 1 million subscribers, you have, let's say, 50 million subscribers. You can command very high rates from the advertisers. Now, the internet is even more complicated, because the content provider, let's say one of your advertisers can enter into direct deals with your subscribers. They say, all right, you are the Economic Times. We'll put a coupon in the Economic Times for you, and you will get a 20% discount if you buy a refrigerator.
Sure.
So the internet is a dynamic marketplace.
Okay,
now,
your point taken.
No, and it is even more complex, because let's say Facebook, the buyers and the sellers are intermixed. There's no,
I've got limited time.
Yeah, the buyers and the sellers are intermixed. For instance, in Facebook or Twitter, the consumers are also the providers of news.
Sure. Okay. So, yeah. TK Arun, do you want to respond to that? And also, I want to broaden the scope of the debate and talk about something else. How do our net neutrality rules compare with what's, say, in Europe or in North America?
So I think from what I understand, I cannot really say with complete certainty. From what I understand, our rules are now perhaps tighter than the rules in most other parts of the world. The US has recently gone back on net neutrality, as you said in your initial opening remarks. So I don't think that's a good deal at all. The very fact that the US regulator in a pro-business administration's watch is going back on net neutrality suggests that telecom companies do hope to throttle somebody or accelerate somebody else and make a quick buck on that. So it is within the possibility of commercial operations to do that, and which is why net neutrality seeks to prevent that. Now, in the case of the dual markets, in the case of the newspapers, both function, and the functioning of one does not affect the welfare of the other. In fact, if the market for advertising works better, you can afford to give away the newspaper cheaper. Now, that is the reason why the English language newspapers, which actually have so many more pages and so much more content, cost less than many regional newspapers, which are much smaller, much thinner, because they don't have the kind of advertising which will cross-subsidize the cost of production of the newspaper.
Yeah.
But that is not the case with the network and the internet and the consumers and the content providers there. That is not the connection between these people.
Sure. All right. On that note, then we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of Policy Watch. I'd like to thank TK Arun and Ravi Prasad for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have on this edition of Policy Watch. But you can send us your feedback, and we are always open to what you have to say. Do send us your feedback at policywatch.feedback@gmail.com. That's it from us. Bye-bye.